Hello there, welcome to the channel and returning to the What If series. This is where we discuss what if it wasn't the USS Voyager that got dragged to the Delta Quadrant by the caretaker, but was some other ship from some other faction maybe. And today we are looking at what if it was a Dominion warship. Now by now we all know the story of the USS Voyager. Voyager was snatched up by the caretaker while in the Badlands looking for a Maquis raider and a lost member of her crew. They ended up at the far side of the galaxy, deep in the Delta Quadrant, 75,000 light years away from home, and had to travel back. But we saw what happened when a ship like the Equinox was dragged there, and what happened to the Maquis raider for that matter. But just what if it was somebody else? What if it wasn't Voyager that got left stuck there, but someone else? Just being clear, what we're talking about of a Dominion warship, we're going to use the actual cruiser as the example here, because I think if it was a Jem'Hadar attack ship, I think it ain't making it. Doesn't stand a chance. And I think a battleship actually might be a worse choice. I think the cruiser might be giving the Dominion the best chance it gets here, and we'll get to that. The cruiser was the intermediate-sized vessel. We saw Gul Dukat commanding one of his ships when the Dominion Cardassian force attacked Deep Space Nine, and we saw them used multiple times. They were hiding in the Omarian Nebula in the Gamma Quadrant. They were part of the initial wave of Dominion ships to come through. These were the larger cruiser version used by the Dominion when the attack ship just wasn't enough. Now, of course, the little bug ships were the preeminent vessels widely used by the Dominion. But when they needed something about heavier hitting, they turned to these. These ships, their size isn't exactly clear. They were definitely in operation by the 2370s, but when they were commissioned is unknown. It's doubtful they were built specifically for the Alpha Quadrant, whereas I think the battleship might have been. But the cruiser was definitely in operation by this point. It was armed with Polaron weapons and torpedoes. Its primary forward weapon was actually a cluster firing torpedo launcher, similar to that of a Galaxy class, which is apt because although there isn't an exact canonical size for this ship, it's estimated to be about the same size as a Galaxy class starship, meaning it's the Dominion's kind of equivalent of that vessel. It was warp and impulse capable, had shields, but did not have any kind of cloaking technology. Internal wise, the ship, like other Dominion ships, it lacked a view screen, and they used shoulder mounted projectors, which project the view screen directly into your head. Not particularly good for humans, but apparently Cardassians could use it, as could Vorta and Jem'Hadar, very likely changelings. The ship also, everything else actually, we're going to have to kind of infer. It likely had medical facilities, but they would have been very limited, probably for treating triage, or maybe taking care of prisoners if that was deemed necessary. But they were never shown. The Vorta will have had their own quarters, because we know that they did, but the Jem'Hadar, who don't really rest in the same way as other species, they rest but they don't need downtime in the same way, would have had training facilities and barracks but no individual quarters. They also would have lacked a mess hall, as only the Vorta ate, and likely just ate in their quarters. This would have drastically reduced the amount of supplies the ship needed. It would have only had, as far as we can tell, because Dominion ships are pretty limited in this area, designed to only operate over limited distances comparatively. Despite its size, there's no information about exactly how much cargo these ships could carry. We do know the Dominion had replicator technology, because one of the Vorta mentioned it when making a quip about Starfleet engineers being able to turn rocks into replicators. This was definitely a technology the Dominion had, but we never saw them use them on their ships, but they very likely had them, but they were probably used more for spare parts and maybe making the Vorta's food. What they couldn't replicate, very importantly, was Ketracel White, which we're going to circle back around to. The exact top speed of the vessel, unknown, but it was probably comparable at least to a Galaxy-class starship, probably faster, probably easily equal to that of an Intrepid class, because Dominion warp technology was more advanced. The vessels were very streamlined, though. It should be pointed out that unlike Voyager, more like the Defiant, a Dominion warship was a warship, built for combat, not long-range independent operations necessarily, meaning they probably don't have many replicators. They've probably not got industrial replicators. We don't know if the ships had shuttles. I'm going to assume they do, but we never saw them. We don't know what their cargo capacity was actually like, and we know because the Jem'Hadar were meant to be kept on a leash, despite the ship's size and crew complement, it probably didn't actually store vast stores of Ketracel White, probably only carrying enough to keep its crew alive for whatever mission they were on and a little bit spare. So unlike Voyager, or another Federation ship or a Romulan vessel, these ships were not really equipped for this kind of a journey. So let's keep all those little things in mind when we look at exactly what would happen if this ship was snatched. Now we know the Caretaker was pulling ships from all over the quadrant, all over the galaxy. So he snatches up a Dominion warship, experiments on the Vorta and on the Jem'Hadar, determines he can't use them for reproduction because Jem'Hadar aren't a real race, probably lack reproductive capability, and the one and only Vorta, or a small number of Vorta aboard the ship, which we can assume there was a minimum of one Vorta. There was always one Vorta commander. With a ship this size, there may have been a small number of other Vorta on board serving as engineers or other such technical staff, maybe even medical staff, because Jem'Hadar aren't exactly known for being great doctors. So maybe there was a few Vorta, but he kills a few just like he does with everyone else. It turns out by giving them the disease that's a result of the experimentation. They're then left stuck in the Delta Quadrant. How do they react to the Caretaker saying sod off? First thing they do is they try to attack the array. They try to seize it by force, but a Dominion warship is no match for the Nasine. He's easily able to fling their ship away. By the time they return, they're damaged, they're limping, but they've got back. They find the Kazon by this point are trying to take the array. The Caretaker is dying, maybe even dead. They want to capture the technology for the Dominion to send themselves home, but with the Kazon attempting to wrestle control of the station, they are forced to engage with them. And although their goal is to capture the station, they're having to deal with these Kazon upstarts. Now, Kazon ships are no match for a Dominion warship. The Kazon Ogla, to our knowledge, only had one of the Predator-class carriers in the area, plus a few raiders. And although these are formidable ships in their own right, the technological disparity compared to the Federation meant that they were too inferior to deal with Voyager, never mind a Dominion warship, hell-bent on actually destroying them. Now, there are two options we can take here. The first and quick one is the Jem'Hadar beat the Kazon, the Caretaker's dead, they board the array, they use it to go home, but they leave some Jem'Hadar there. They may even occupy the Okompa homeworld, and they then begin to try and pull forces to the Gamma Quadrant using the array for the Dominion. They bring a load of founders with them, they bring a load of Vorta with them, and their goal is to study the array. They replicate its technology, and suddenly the Dominion has technology of the Nasine, advanced weaponry, shields, replication technology, and not to mention this wonderful ability to fling ships all over the galaxy. Absolute nightmare. That's option one. Option two is they destroy the array in the battle with the Kazon. The Kazon, not wanting the Dominion to have it, realizing how dangerous they are, destroy the array themselves, making an enemy of the Dominion and vice versa. The Kazon considering the Dominion to be an enemy. Probably in this case much more rightfully so. So the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta set course for the Gamma Quadrant and they go at maximum warp. But the Vorta already know there is a problem here. Unless they can secure supplies of Ketracel White, the Jem'Hadar are going to die. So the Vorta concoct a plan. First of all, they start searching for anyone that might have the ability to make it. Third, they encounter races like the Vidians. The Kazon lack the ability. Maybe the Vidians can make it, they can synthesize it, and in exchange, they offer them the genetics technology of the Dominion. Technology the Vidians might be able to use to cure the phage. Advanced cloning technology to replace organs, genetic engineering technology that might be able to purify their genome and remove it. Very appealing to the Vidians. And maybe that results in them having some Ketracel White, but now what? The Vidians aren't going to travel with them all the way to the Alpha Quadrant. All the way to the Gamma Quadrant, rather. So they've got a problem. They could pile in the Ketracel White, but that's still a problem. The Jem'Hadar now have all this Ketracel White, and they know they've got a people here who can make it for them. The Vorta are concerned that the Jem'Hadar might turn on them, because the Vorta and the Jem'Hadar don't get along, and there's no changeling here to keep them in line. The Vorta make the brutal decision that they're going to actually have to kill the Jem'Hadar and just run the ship themselves. They try to maybe figure out if some of the Jem'Hadar could be trusted. Maybe if they cull the ranks, decimate them, or remove half of them, maybe they can stretch the Ketracel White out. But this still runs the risk that those remaining Jem'Hadar will turn on the Vorta, and we know that the Vorta are not against simply killing their own men if it means their own survival. And as much as the Jem'Hadar will be useful in these dangerous parts of the galaxy, they can't on their own hold for the Dominion. They could try and leave them behind on a planet, tell them you're going to secure this world for the Dominion, but the Jem'Hadar aren't stupid. They know that that's not what the Vorta are trying to do. They're trying to get rid of them. So they quickly turn on the Jem'Hadar. They kill as many of them as they can, altering life support systems and everybody aboard the ship, trying to kill the Jem'Hadar. The Jem'Hadar realize what's happening and they turn on the Vorta. But the Vorta are sneaky, underhanded bastards, quite honestly, and they are able to turn the tide on the Jem'Hadar because they caught them off guard. And the Jem'Hadar are, for the most part, killed, but a few are going to survive. They get off the ship in some of those shuttles. A lingering problem for the Vorta, so now they got to get the hell out of here. They don't need the Ketracel Whites anymore, fine, so they get rid of it. But they don't need the Vorta, they don't need the Vidians anymore. Their objective now is to get out of there. The remaining Jem'Hadar go to their new enemy, the Kazon. And it's like, we don't care about sharing a bit of technology. You want transporters? You want replicators? We'll give it to you. Help us get our ship back. The Jem'Hadar work with the Kazon to pursue the Dominion warship as it's chased and harried across the Delta Quadrant, eventually resulting in them being cornered, surrounded, because the Vorta are not soldiers. They're not fighters like the Jem'Hadar. They're more trying to run. They can't man the ship either properly. There's simply not enough of them. And ultimately they are overwhelmed by the Kazon and Jem'Hadar forces that have come after them. The Jem'Hadar recapture their ship, but find that all the Ketracel Whites has been destroyed. They then do what Jem'Hadar and Dominion forces likely do. They betray the Kazon because they're not going to give an enemy of the Dominion technology that can actually help them. They've already supported them in some limited ways, helped them with tactics, maybe refined some of their technology, made the weapons and shields a little stronger. That's already enough as far as the Jem'Hadar are concerned. They then turn to the original thought of, we're going to hold this for the Dominion. They retreat back after betraying their Kazon brethren and try to find the Vidians again to try and get their hands on more Ketracel White. But by this point, everyone knows just how treacherous and dangerous the Dominion is, and the Vidians are more interested in harvesting their organs than actually helping them, although Jem'Hadar organs, because the saturated Ketracel White, maybe aren't so useful. They've made enemies everywhere. Their ship is now in a state of disrepair. They're running out of Ketracel White. They start to turn on each other, which likely, in my opinion, then results in their ship being destroyed. They were never going to make it home. They don't have the longevity, the range, or the resources aboard a ship like this to make such a journey. Their better option might have been to try to capture the array and then use its technology to send themselves home, or to bring the Dominion to them, more likely, and expand into the Delta Quadrant for the glory of the founders and that kind of stuff. They'd have been heralded as heroes, but failing that, they just became another lost ship in the Delta Quadrant that fell victim to all the hostilities there. Incapable of sustaining peaceful relations with others like Voyager was, they simply made enemy after enemy after enemy and eventually resulted in their own destruction. Settling on a planet was never going to be an option because, again, the Jem'Hadar need Ketracel White, and the only power around that could probably make it would be the Vidians, who themselves can't be trusted. The Kazon would be forever hounding them for their technology and because they perceive them as a threat. So, in the end, I think it would just be an utter failure for a Dominion ship. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below if you've got an alternative theory of what might actually happen with the Dominion vessel. I might be massively underestimating them. After all, these were intelligent beings. But by nature, in my opinion, Vorta are very treacherous. Jem'Hadar hate them. Jem'Hadar can't survive without Ketracel White. And without the support base of the Dominion, Dominion ships like their cruisers simply wouldn't be able to function and maintain their systems for protracted periods of time with limited resources. They would try to steal whatever they could, trade technology and other things to get what they want, but they wouldn't want to prop up others. They might have stayed around and made an alliance with the Vidians or the Kazon and sort of made a new Dominion out there, but again, without the Ketracel White, the Jem'Hadar die. Without an ability to recontact the Dominion, eventually they all die and the Dominion does nothing about it. They might have tried to modify their ship. They would have made adjustments, tried to make it a bit faster, improve cargo capacity, make resources last longer. But again, this is a warship, not a vessel of exploration. It doesn't have onboard fabrication facilities that we know of like Federation ships do. It lacks the cargo capacity and supply levels that Starfleet ships have, and redundant systems that Starfleet vessels have, not to mention all the scientific and resource systems to identify and gather resources the ship and crew require. So, even though the needs of a Jem'Hadar crew are less than those of a human crew, I don't see them making it home. I don't see them making out of the quadrant. I don't see them surviving 6 months. But again, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you made it all to the end of this video, I thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and bye-bye.